I think James's question here takes us in a little bit of a different direction,
okay.
But I think you all have mentioned that cost-effective energy efficiency is declining, but there still seems to be a need to do significant energy efficiency improvements and decarbonization for older buildings, especially rentals that have the problem of the split incentive. What tools should we be looking at to make sure that tenants aren't being stuck with low efficiency housing and high energy costs?
Yeah, I do want to mention that on average, there's less low-cost energy efficiency, and on average, a home may not be quote cost effective to upgrade its weatherization, but there are certainly many homes out there or rental buildings where they have very little efficiency, and the plan does call out the fact that we still have work to do for a number of segments that have been underserved in the past. And this is true for single family homes, and it's also true for commercial buildings. One of the asks that we have for the region is actually to develop an EUI database of commercial buildings, EUI being energy use intensity. Kerry talked about that earlier. We have some information that's being developed in pockets, but we don't have great data kind of writ large for how our buildings are operating. And if we have a little bit more insight into the buildings that are inefficient, we can target those and do the necessary efficiency. It's fine. The struggle, I think, I'm not an implementer, so I don't want to be too bold in my statement, but the struggle, I think, is finding the buildings that need the work and being able to really target the ones that need it the most.
Thank you, Tina. Just to poke at that a little more, do you see any elements of the cost effectiveness criteria, perhaps, that need to be revisited or updated for energy efficiency? Because what we call energy efficiency cost effectiveness, when you say is declining.
Right. And so, I mean, part of it is looking at it at a building level versus as a general kind of on average level. So one single building might have a different calculus because the savings are going to be significantly more given where they're starting. And so that could be a cost effective project versus another building would not be cost effective. So you have to really look at those specifics. We do in the plan also actually say for the weatherization question for those non-weatherized homes that let's put cost effectiveness aside and just get it done. So there are cases, and I think that each jurisdiction will have to make this decision, but there are going to be cases where you need to be a little bit more flexible on that calculation and recognize that this is a long overdue and necessary improvement.
Emeka, do you want to comment on the split incentive?
Yeah, I would wouldn't mind doing so. So one quick thing, and I think this is again, I'm also scanning the chat and noting that this has come up, and we certainly have a program that is directly designed to help us address the split incentive challenge, which is our energy efficiency as a service program. I will say it is probably true what you're suggesting, Smita, that there is room for us to, and maybe the way I would characterize it is adjust our interpretation of the subjective term that is sort of cost effectiveness, right? To begin to think about sort of what are the value proposition of those resources back to us, both from an EE perspective and from a DR perspective. And I will point out, right, it's sort of to the specific context that the question provides, right? As I said, we are looking at significant additions of energy efficiency investment, in our current, our upcoming IRP, right? So even with what may be a declining potential with respect to cost effectiveness, we're still looking at investing in significant resources, right? Like I said, over 100 megawatts by 2040. So I think it's a bit of a mix, I guess. Maybe it's a bit of a mixed story there. and there's room for some subjectiveness to be adjusted.
Okay, thank you. Kerry, did you want to add a market perspective to that?
I was just nodding along with Emeka. I think the entire environment has changed from this old world where we were looking to avoid long-term power plant construction to a world where we're looking to enable as much adoption of carbon-free electricity as possible, while also managing the load requirements for the grid as we electrify everything. And so the costs are different too. Building out all of the transmission and distribution capabilities, upgrading the systems, buildings and the technologies inside of them are changing, and the way that we look at them and how and what they can enable at specific times and points on the grid. There's so much change happening, and I think that the cost effectiveness analysis is still looking at things from an old lens. So I think Emeka hit it for me, and I wish I knew exactly what we should go to, and I don't, but I do think we need to be looking at the value of resources at specific times and locations, and that carbon needs to be a factor as well in what we're thinking about.
Absolutely, and I see one of the chat questions or rather comments here is, perhaps it's time for a new regional discussion regarding the value of metering and collection of detailed hourly or even sub-hourly consumption by end use data. So I think what I'm hearing here is the importance of data. And in fact, Tina, you also alluded to data, be it at the EUI level for a specific building, but adding another that time element to it. Also, not just the intensity, but at the time and by which end use it's being consumed, seems to be an important element in this discussion here.